Hi, this is a really quick introduction to some of the color controls in Premiere to allow you to sort of do more than just your sort of simple primary grading and bring in sort of some secondaries, which can help um, really enhance your work. So just to start with, I'm in the edit view, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the color view. So there's a button here that says color. Now, if on the version of Premiere you're working on, you don't have that, you can press Window Workspace's color as well, okay, to change to the color workspace. But what you'll do is when you switch to color, you'll see that it brings up the color controls here on the right, and it usually just makes the sort of the preview window a little bit bigger. Now the thing is, I can start making color correction straight away and it will make it on the clip. What I would recommend is don't do that. Instead, select your project panel here. So you can see it's kind of highlighted in blue. Yeah, whichever panel you select gets highlighted. Select the project panel, go File, New Adjustment Layer. Okay, and it will say, oh, what resolution is it? Now the resolution should match your sequence, and the time base should as well. So hopefully, you've got one specifically for your sequence. This is just matching to the clips I've downloaded, and it will, do that. Click OK. There's my adjustment layer, and I can then drag that and drop it on top. And you'll see I can see through it. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't change anything. But what is actually happening is it's kind of like a transparent layer. It's like in Photoshop when you go File, New Layer, and you get this new layer on top of whatever picture you've already got, but it's see-through, right? It's there's nothing on there, and that's exactly what the adjustment layer is doing. So I'm going to take another adjustment layer and drop it on for the other clip, and again stretch that till the end. So you want individual adjustment layers for each clip, and then you can, rather than grading on the clip, select the adjustment layer. Now we're going to be grading on that, and that's better because if we choose to disregard our grade, we can just delete the adjustment layer. The original clip remains untouched. Okay, so here are our controls, and like I said, this is just a very quick look at this, and I'm going to look at the orange and teal type of look, which is where you add in some blues and you add in some warmer tones like oranges and so on. So they contrast with each other quite well. And that's just an example here. It's not saying that's what you have to do, but I just want to show that because the problem with doing that, you see, is in fact if we look at the color wheels, orange sits on one side, blue sits on the other. So like I said, they contrast quite well with each other, but it's very difficult to do if you do it as a primary because you can only move this one way or the other. You can't sort of pull it both ways. So this is where secondary controls come in really handy. So what I'm going to do with this, okay, is let's go. So like you can look at this and you can see it is quite orange. Okay, looking at the white part's quite orange. So I'm going to change the color temperature, bring it down a bit, try to correct that to some extent. Okay, there we go. So it's made it a little bit cooler. Then I'm going to go to color wheels. I can just do my color wheels. Now this, again, this is a basic. This is a primary grade. Sorry, so it's going to be grading all the whole image. But what I'm going to do is the wall, kind of is certainly in the highlight section, I would say, and a bit of the midtone. So those areas I'm going to drag, just make a little bit cooler, and it should hopefully affect the wall. Okay, and so we get a bit more of a bluish wall. All right, so now the wall's gone a bit more blue, but so has she. Okay, overall, oh, I don't know what happens with that. It kind of jumps back by itself. I did not let go of the mouse at that point, but I'm sure that control just moved a bit. There we go. So yeah, like I said, but so as our subject on the screen, she's gone a little bit cooler as well. So this is where I could jump to the HSL secondary. Jump on that, and we've got these three color pickers. So we start with the one on the left, and I can actually select a color that I want to grade. Okay, click that, and you'll see that it selects an area of hue, saturation, and luminance. Okay, so the hue is the color, saturation is the intensity of that color, and the luminance is how bright it is. So I selected on the left hand side of her sort of trousers there, and I think obviously they're the darker bits. Obviously I could select another area and it will make a new selection. Again, that seems a bit more representative. Now you also have underneath that this little color gray tick box, which if I tick it, should basically make the whole image gray, and the only thing I'll see in color are the selections. So because I selected the trousers, the floor is a very similar orange, so that gets selected, but you can see there's not much. So what you can actually do is at the top you can choose to stretch the range of the hue, the saturation, so you can kind of play around with these a bit and see if you can start to select more. And you can see that as we do that, it's actually starting to even select the whiteboard and so on. So you have to kind of, I guess, be aware of where you are. And you can also move it by selecting the middle, the center point, so you can kind of move that around and see, if you can get where you want the selection to be. In the top and the background there is very similar, and then the bottom triangle, so the top triangle, like I said, stretches the range. The bottom triangle just basically stretches the fall off. Okay, so in other words, it doesn't just stop at a color, it kind of slowly falls off. So I can play around with it. You don't need an exact, you don't need it to be perfect selection of all the colors, but if you get enough in the range, it'll usually look and work quite well. So what I'm going to try to do, so I guess the darker parts are the bits that are selecting the floor. And again, I might want the floor anyway, but let's see if we could just pull it in a little bit. Okay, so yeah, I'll play around with it very quickly because, like I said, this is just a tutorial to show you how this can be done. You can try it stuff yourself. So, well, let's say we go with something like that. Okay, so we've got a little bit of the floor uh, as well. So that part of the floor definitely will warm up a lot more. But if I now go down here, okay, this color wheel, all right, doesn't have a shadows, midtones, highlights. It's just a color wheel that will grade the selection. Okay, so if I take this center point and start to move it towards the warmer colors now, okay, it will only be warming up the areas of the shot that, like I said, were in the selection. So the wall or anything like that is not being affected by this whatsoever. And that is all happening on one adjustment layer. Okay, so if I take that adjustment layer, just turn it off by clicking the little eye symbol here, we can go back to our original shot, and you can see now that original shot feels so orange. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it was warm, but it was difficult to tell. Whereas here, the colors do, in a sense, feel more natural, but yet they're also popping a lot more because oranges against blues will really pop out. And again, like I said, this isn't to say you have to do the orange and teal thing. I just wanted to show that as an example. So that's kind of one way we could do that. And we might say, well, hang on, I want to grade that wall a bit more. So should I go back and adjust it there? Well, maybe we should just add a new adjustment layer. Okay, stick a new adjustment layer. Again, make sure it's stretched to the length of the clip. And on this one, if I select this adjustment layer, again, all the controls are there, but nothing has been changed. You can see nothing has been selected. All right, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a selection this time on the wall. And again, I can press the color gray to see how that works. And so far, it hasn't done much at all. Now, the other thing you can do as well, by the way, let's try that again. Sorry, here we go. Click and drag actually is probably better. There we go. Okay. Let's deselect that. Awesome. That's working a lot better. Now, I might want to add more colors. If I select this color selector again, it'll just reset and select a new color. So really what I want to do is add to it. So I'm going to click this plus, and I'm going to do that, and you'll see that hopefully these will start to get wider as I use this and drag around. At least it should do. Okay, so what the plus does is it adds that range to it. It's not doing a great job, and minus will take away. But like I said, if you're finding it's not doing a brilliant job with it, you could just do it yourself. Top stretches the range, and the bottom, like I said, just adjust the feather. So we could sort of play with the selection and see if we can. There we go, brilliant. Yeah, we can get a really good selection. That's a really nice, clean selection of the wall, I think. So undo that. And now when I go in and make again a grade change, it is only affecting the wall and nothing else. Okay, and again, I can turn the top adjustment layer off and see what it looked like before. So still have a bit of that green. Okay, turn it back on, and that's better. Now, we talked about the orange and greens, sorry, the orange and blues, but if you look here, you got a green running along in between. So we might be like, well, hang on, we don't really want the green. Why not just make that blue as well? Add yourselves another adjustment layer, start making some selections there, and you can make that blue. Yeah, and you might even say, well, hang on, I like the orange being at the bottom, I like the blue at the top, but I don't want that orange there. Fine, add another adjustment layer, select that, maybe just desaturate it, take all the color out so that it doesn't stand out as much. So those little touches, those little secondaries, are the things that can really help add marks to your assessment. So if we look at this second clip, which at the moment has one adjustment layer, hopefully if it loads up, oh, here we go. So my computer seems to be running a bit slow. So again, it's very, like I said, this is designed to be sort of obviously quite black and white in a way. Really, you can tell they're playing a game that is all black and white. All the props have been selected, their clothing. So but us adding in color or so on, might not be sort of what they were obviously trying to achieve. But here, as an example, we might be like, well, this is the look. The one we had for the first clip is kind of the style that we want to go with all the other shots. So we kind of look at that and say, okay, how can we kind of start to match that up? Well, usually what would happen here is, the warmer tones would come out in the skin and the cooler tones would be in the background. So Now, one of the things I found with this is once I made this quite cool, it was very difficult to select their skin tones, and that seemed to be because the skin tones go quite cold as well. So just bear that in mind as well. Sometimes things can get a little bit more difficult. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do two sets of secondaries instead. So I'm going to go select color, and you can see there I've selected a skin tone, but I'm going to add to that. And again, what I'm going to do is as I work through it, there you go, press the color gray, and you can see you've got quite a good selection. Again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it's not the way color correction and grading works. But I'm going to, like I said, warm that up a bit and move them more towards sort of the oranges. Okay, and there we go. So we've kind of done that. Drop another adjustment layer on, and again, just keep in mind with these videos, this is like one style of doing things. You don't have to have the mix. Okay, you might just want something that's just got a bit more blue to it, which is fine, but then maybe you want to add different degrees of blue to the person. So we select that, and again I'm just going to do something similar to what we had before. And in fact, I find it easier to make selections on the background by just adjusting our selection here than using the plus. Personally, at the moment it seems to be working a lot better. So we'll see if we can do that. Oh, although I say that, let's go to the plus here because this is very different and see if that can get added in at all. So again, a bit of tweaking needed really. Here we go. So it seems to be to do with the luminance really, isn't it? So if we look at that, turn that off. Yeah, it's getting brighter, isn't it? So what we really need to do to select more of that wall, if I move it to the brighter parts, I imagine, there you go, you can see the selection kind of comes in. So it's just that it needs to kind of cover that area. But again, there we go, I've got that. And then if I choose to, and a bit of his top, but if I choose to now, I could perhaps make that a little bit more blue instead. And you can see we can bring in those sort of cooler tones and so on. Okay, and so what we're left with is something very different now to what we had if I turn off the two adjustment layers when we started. Okay, so I guess the point is, or the key point is that, like I said, you need to use secondaries, okay, to really be able to do anything. I guess creatively that sort of beyond sort of like just a bare minimum. I feel that you can do quite a lot with primaries. Maybe I'm underselling primaries, but it does have its limits. Okay, a secondary will really allow you to select individual components of the image. Apart from that, you can see as well at the bottom we've actually got a vignette, which I quite like because it kind of gives it sort of a more filmic feel. So if I select the very top one, so vignette is basically to do with, so generally with lenses, some lenses, they'll sort of capture more light in the center and less on the sides. And so the sides start to have this darker approach. So if you go right on the vignette, it'll make it white around the edges. So if you go down, it'll make it black. So generally, because you capture less light, it's usually black. So as you can see, we pull that down a bit and we start to get that sort of black finish. We can adjust sort of the point, we can bring it in a bit if we want to as well. And we can sort of adjust its feather and its, you know, basically its fall off, as you can see. But I could find a mount where I'm like, oh, I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, because I don't want to make it too obvious either. All right, and just kind of give it a slight vignette, perhaps. Okay, and then just sort of remember those numbers, and just apply me. Now, to be fair, I could have just put the vignette. Now, actually, no. You know what? I'm going to undo that because actually, that's not a great way to do it. This is what happens when I kind of look at stuff and say, hey, I could do this. No, that's not a brilliant way to do it. In fact, what I want to do instead is add a video track. So I'm going to right click there and I'm going to add a track. Okay, yeah, I want to add one video track. Add 0 audio tracks. Okay, there you go. So hopefully I should have a video track. So yeah, because what I'm going to do is stick a another adjustment layer, but this time I'm going to stretch it so it runs across all my clips. Okay, because it can run across all of them. Yeah, because I shouldn't be doing a vignette on one clip. The vignette should be applying to all the clips. So now I'll add my vignette back in. Okay, however I want. Oh, feather that way. Okay, and once I'm done with it and I'm happy with that, regardless of which clip I go on, they should all have the same vignette because it's one adjustment layer running along the top. My computer's just taking a second to catch up. There we go, and the vignette is there. Yeah, so I can finish off with that. So there's a lot you can do with color correction and grading, and I've just touched upon it, and I want you to have a think about that as you work through this. Okay, thank you for watching.